Hey everybody, Art Breeze here. This is Summoner Wars, Cloaks and Breakers. Notice how the machinist runs away immediately. There's two reasons for that. The first is we want to create final form Vlox. That's adding a hand cannon and moto boots and using Vlox to copy the power. The other reason is we want to keep machinists away from witches. If a witch copies a machinist's power, she can throw 6 ranged dice right back at that machinist. That's particularly troubling when the machinist is sitting within 3 spaces in a straight line of a summoning point. You saw back there how the witch used the sniper's ability. Really, all of the cloak commons have great abilities for the witches to copy, and the witches have 3 AV to boot, which is superior to most of the other stat lines that you can find. The witch is a better sniper. The witch is a better machinist, at least with range, and similarly, it's a better bandit with range. It's otherwise identical to a gunner, but a gunner has a great power that the witch can use freely. You've got Vlox already using the machinist's double attack power, but no moto boots, no hand cannon. Clearly, these are buried in the deck. Sometimes you run into that problem with the cloaks. You see an early use of dagger here. That may just be because that's the hand that he was given. Ideally, I like doing more with dagger the turn the dagger is summoned. Here you see a major whiff, of course, 2 for 5 instead of 3 for 5. That means that the gunner survives a turn, and that's too bad because the witches don't have much health. He's going to lose them both here. Yet, surprisingly, the parties aren't that far off in their discard piles and economy at this point in the game. Keep a close eye on that number. That's the discard here and the discard there. You can already see that the breakers are falling behind. As the cloaks retreat into their own end, they've managed to do a lot of damage to the bender's economy. Now, the benders, aka the breakers, normally I like to play Tacullu more forward, and Dunky has chosen not to do this game. I think that's an interesting choice. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Quite the contrary. With the cloaks especially, you have to be always worried about the threat of dagger and an out of shadows turn, which will warp dagger and also Vlox and another unit behind Tacullu to do major damage. All it takes is 1 turn or 2, and Tacullu's finished. So I think Dunky's probably aware of that. Here we see the Admiral coming out. This is not a great spot for the Admiral, crammed into the zone next to a Deceiver. Despite the 7 dice thrown at the Deceiver, it still survives. That power they have against adjacent units is a really strong power. Hypnotize and push are now being used along with engage, and that Admiral is basically toast. That was some serious extra damage that Dunky managed to do just by having good placement of those deceivers. And of course, Gulldune is exposed now. Gulldune doesn't have a lot of health. He's a big part of why the breakers work, but Dunky's going to have to just be careful what he does with Gulldune from this point forward. Notice again the discard piles, however. The breakers are beginning to fall well behind the cloaks. They are at a 6-card disadvantage, although that might be a little deceptive because look at the cards that are in play. There is a hand cannon that's sitting on the machinist, and there is a smoke bomb sitting on the gunner. So it's not as far as it might seem, but the breakers are still falling behind. That, by the way, was a nice move to protect Gulldune, actually pushing Gulldune back 3 spaces. I don't know if it helps to have that 4 health wall on the side of the board that Vlox is blocking. I tend to avoid diagonal walls at all times because it's easy to pile units on top of them, even though at this moment the breakers have a strong presence on top of those 2 walls. If they ever lose that and the cloaks will come in and surround it, it could be trouble. It's amazing to me that Mind Witches could do so much, and yet still the breakers will fall behind economically to the cloaks units. The Cloaks have two units, and they're in play right now, Deceivers and Wind Mages, that generally lack AV attack value. There are the Wind Archers who have 4 AV, but I don't think I've seen a single one played yet. When you play those Wind Archers, of course, they become magnets for aggro, and especially a faction like the Cloaks, with so much movement, they can usually find a way to get a hold of that Archer and destroy it. Here, Vlox has finally taken some damage. He's only got 5 health left. He can still be dangerous, but he can't leave himself exposed at all. It really is crucial in almost any game you play with the Cloaks to avoid damage to Vlox as much as possible until the very final stages of the game. Otherwise, you end up hiding Vlox, and Vlox's attack, that double attack with Final Form Vlox, is probably his best weapon. Dunky here has chosen to back off with the breakers and hide Gulldune back there. Here we're going to see what I was talking about earlier, the Witch using the double attack on the machinist. Of course, that's a whiff. Too bad. Actually, the Witch used cover fire in order to protect Gulldune instead. I guess it's worth mentioning that option was there to, instead of moving, could have attacked twice and maybe could have destroyed that machinist. Instead, the machinist attacks back. The players are now at the bottom of their decks, and you finally see Tacullu start moving up. One reason I picked this matchup in particular in this game is because I noticed that the Cloaks had a slight advantage over the breakers throughout all the bottom tiers except for tier 1. And in tier 1, the Cloaks only had a 33% win ratio. So I wanted to kind of showcase why the Cloaks lose to the breakers. I think you can see why the Cloaks win to the breakers. One, if you use the standard strategy that I use with the breakers, which is moving Tacullu forward, you end up being vulnerable to an Out of Shadows turn and dagger. The other reason the Cloaks win, what you're seeing here, is they're winning on economy. They're 6 cards ahead of the breakers. To this point, however, the breakers have managed to mostly neutralize dagger by picking off the bandits. Dagger is basically useless without bandits to summon off of, and Sinsin, of course. You'll also see that loaded machinist being used. It makes sense to do when Vlox's health is low. Notice as well what Vlox is doing. He's hiding in that crook in between those 2 diagonal walls. That's why we tend to avoid those wall formations. If I didn't know any better, I would say that Tacullu's in big trouble here, and it's only a matter of time. As I think about it, we haven't actually seen control played a single time, and Vlox for sure is worried about that. Mind control is Tacullu's best weapon in any matchup, and very often, mind control will make the difference in a game. That's why I tend to want to play Tacullu forward, is so I can actually use mind control. However, the fact we have not seen mind control in this game suggests to me that Tacullu is still waiting to play it. Here we see Tacullu taking some damage, down about half now. With the weaker units, Tacullu does have an opportunity, and here's like great example, like Dagger now is in big trouble because Dagger can't really do anything without the bandits. And here comes Kalal, which is a unit you don't see very often because she costs 7. And oh, that was a huge, huge 4 for 4. Absolutely enormous. With that machinist gone, that takes away not only that machinist that can attack twice, but Vlox and the ability to attack twice and move. Had Tacullu whiffed on that machinist, maybe the outcome of this game would have been different. I'm actually still looking at this game and thinking that Vlox has the advantage and can win this. 1 for 3 doesn't help. But what we see here is Kalal actually getting a lot of work done and pushing Dagger away, making dagger useless against Kalal. That is a huge power, especially at the end of the game, for a unit to be able to just push melee units away while she shoots them. As I think about it, maybe that is why Kalal costs 7. With Kalal's ability to completely neutralize the melee champ dagger, it's only a matter of time before the end comes. We saw a lot of interesting things in this game, but most of all, we saw 2 very good players, former league champions, going at it with a faction that can be won by either side. Congrats to Dunky, and good luck in all your future games.